Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos or have sent me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. We are coming up on very exciting times this week because this week Star Wars comes out. And I cannot tell you how excited I am about that. All right, and with that gotten out of the way, let's go ahead and get to your questions. George Boslaw. How do the ranks work in the Sea Org? I understand some are permanent and others temporary based on your job level. How does one get promoted in rank, and when do you get real rank? I understand the former president of Scientology had a low Sea Org rank. Are there others who share the rank of captain with David Miscavige? Yeah, I've been asked about this a few times since I started doing this, and it's kind of surprised me that anybody really cares about this, but here's how it goes. There are ranks and ratings, is what it's called in the Sea Organization. It is a paramilitary operation, and so people have uniforms and insignia and whatnot. I won't try to explain the entire system because that would take too long, but basically there are officer and non-officer ranks, right? Petty officer ranks. You start off as a swamper, and then you move up to petty officer third class, and petty officer second class, and petty officer first class, and then chief petty officer, and then after chief petty officer you move up to the officer ranks, and I think it starts with warrant officer. What I'm going to do is put up a graphic that actually shows all the rank progressions up through to captain. And captain is the highest rank anybody could hold in the Sea Org at this point. Commodore was the highest rank, but that was only Hubbard. Nobody else ever had or will hold that rank. David Miscavige is the only person to have ever permanently held the rank of captain. The way the temporary ranks work is it's called a brevet rank, and that's not just a Sea Org thing. It means it's a temporary rank that's assigned to a person because they need that rank or authority for the job that they're doing. For example, the French guy, Guillaume Lessev, or other international management executives are often given a brevet rank of captain. And they have, the 4 stripes on their sleeve and whatnot, and that's only a temporary rank that they hold because of their senior position, the post that they're holding. Guillaume Lessev was the executive director international, and that was a very senior position in the ecclesiastical authority of Scientology. So he was given a rank accordingly, and when he would show up at events, he would come out in his uniform and have the 4 stripes and all that sort of thing. Same with Ray Midoff. He was the senior CS international, the senior case supervisor international. And Mike Rinder, when he was in the Sea Organization, he held a high rank. And Marty Rathbun, was a captain or something when he was in the Sea Org. So what that really means is it's just a symbol of authority, right? Their real rank that they've earned as you go, through the Sea Org could have been, petty officer second class or chief petty officer or something. The way that works is every year there is an officer selection council or officer selection board. I think they're supposed to meet 4 times a year per the policies, but really it only comes down to once a year. I think it was in August. On August, there was Sea Org Day, was celebrating the birth of the Sea Organization. And on Sea Org Day, it's a special day for Sea Org members, and there's a special Sea Org Day ceremony. And at that ceremony is when everybody is promoted who has applied for it. In order to get promoted in the Sea Organization, there's a whole form you have to fill out to submit for promotion. And you have to do it yourself. Nobody is just going to promote you unless something really, really special happens. There was a security officer one time who literally saved somebody's life by running into a burning house, a burning building on L. Ron Hubbard Way or in that neighborhood area, and pulled out 2 people who were in there who would otherwise have died. That was pretty heroic. That was Roy Rodriguez who did that, and he was promoted to officer rank because he did that. So, you get that sort of thing can happen, but that's pretty rare. For the most part, you have to apply for it. Often they're rejected. If you're not in good standing for some reason, you're in ethics trouble or you messed up on something, then you won't get promoted. The promotion application has to go through a local selection board, and then it goes up to the international officer selection board, and they really push for people to try to get it. And you have to, when you do the application, your senior has to sign off, and the ethics officer has to sign off, and the course room supervisor has to sign off that you regularly go to study, and there's a whole thing to it, and it really takes a lot of time, and it was a real pain in the ass. So I hardly ever put in for promotion, and I think I ended up being a petty officer second class when I left the Sea Org. So that means I was only promoted twice, and it was never really a super big deal with me because all the rank doesn't really mean a lot within the Sea Org community. You kind of hardly ever wear a uniform that shows your rank. And when you do, all it really means is if you're an officer or a senior petty officer is that people hold you accountable for more stuff. You're supposed to be more responsible, which means you get more duties assigned to you. And when you're already working 24/7, not keeping up with your job and getting yelled and screamed at all the time because you're not keeping up with your job, not getting any time off and all the rest, the last thing you want to do is have somebody else have another excuse to berate you for being irresponsible. And to me, that's what rank always equated to. So I was never big on getting rank or rating or anything like that. But some people really get into it and they climb up the ranks, and it is, it's a big deal on Sea Org Day to be promoted in front of everybody because everybody's there at the ceremony, and it's a big deal, and it is kind of nice. You march up, they read off everybody who's getting promoted, and they go up, and there's a senior officer there on stage, and you walk up and you salute, and they hand you this thing and you salute, and it's all very cool. And if you are going from petty officer to officer status, then they literally give you a new hat with an officer stripe on it, right? And so there's some bragging rights to that and that sort of thing, but that's really about all that there is to it. So as far as anybody else ever having been a captain in the Sea Org, no. David, this is interesting actually. I found this out in reading the IRS documentation when the church applied for tax-exempt status, that David Miscavige is the only guy who doesn't hold brevet rank as captain. He is a captain. That is his rank. Of course it is. He gave it to himself. So he's the only captain in the Sea Org, which means he's the leading officer of the Sea Org, and apparently hates it when he's referred to as Captain David Miscavige in the media. Really doesn't like that because it puts the Sea Org too much there. And when it comes to courtroom drama and media and stuff, they like to kind of downplay that whole Sea Org thing because it's the key to understanding what's behind the corporate veil of Scientology, because it's the Sea Org that David Miscavige uses to control Scientology. And everybody outside of Scientology thinks it's the corporate laws and the corporation structure and whatnot, and none of that has anything to do with how David Miscavige holds power. So anyway, that's ranks and ratings. Linda Richards, how does a Scientologist feel when the promised superpowers fail to materialize after attesting to clear or an official OT level? Well, cognitive dissonance is a beautiful thing in the world of Scientology and destructive cults. And by saying that, I mean that people are able to rationalize almost anything. It is amazing, our capacity to explain away, justify, or come up with reasons why things are the way they are, as opposed to how we think they should be or how they're supposed to be. In the case of superpowers, in Scientology, the levels of Scientology are extremely subjective, and the promises that are made are extremely subjective. Hubbard talks about telepathy and telekinesis, moving things around with your mind and that sort of thing, in very vague terms. There are no distinct, definite, when you reach this level, you will be able to do A, B, and C, right? For example, a clear is a person who no longer has his own reactive mind. That's how it's defined in Scientology now. And any notes or information from Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, or the 1950, 1951 time period are all downplayed. The idea of eidetic memory recall, being able to recall everything you've ever seen or had happen to you in your life, and the whole being able to think like a supercomputer and never getting sick and that sort of thing. All those are really, really downplayed. It says it right in Dianetics. I mean, you'd think that some people would hold them to those standards, but they don't. Instead, they rationalize away that, Hubbard said that, but really he was talking about OT, and when we get to OT, then we'll understand, then we'll have those abilities or powers or that sort of thing, because Hubbard made more discoveries later on after he wrote Dianetics. See, he wrote Dianetics, and he had this idea that if you didn't have a reactive mind, that you'd have all these abilities, but he didn't know about the OT phenomenon and the OT stuff that you have to deal with, right? He didn't know about that. And so he discovered that later on, and that's why I don't have those abilities, right? It's because I haven't gotten to OT yet. And then later on in Scientology, like you get through clear, and then you go to OT3, right? Which is the whole Xenu story and all of that, and the body thetans and that whole thing, right? You do OT1, OT2, and OT3. And OT3's end result is freedom from overwhelm. So now I'm free, I've done OT3, now I'm no longer overwhelmed. Well, that is wholly subjective. I mean, what does that even mean? I'm free from overwhelm. So then, if a week or two or three or a year or two or three after I finish OT3, I feel overwhelmed, oh my God, my life, and the this and the that and the finances and my job, and this is getting too much for me. Well, what the Scientologist will tend to do is go, oh, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I guess there's some part of my OT case, my OT problems, that I haven't handled yet. And rather than blame it on the fact that they are not free from overwhelm, they'll just create this idea that, there must be something there to handle. And then they'll go into a church of Scientology and they'll get a session. And they'll address whatever it is that they feel is overwhelming them, and then they'll feel better. And then they come out and they go, oh yeah, it's all good now, and I don't feel overwhelmed anymore. And so now they're free from overwhelm again, right? Until the next time they're overwhelmed, or until they get fired from their job, or they get cancer, or this or that or the other thing, or their wife says they want to leave them. Whatever else it is that's going to happen in life that will hit up against that thing they're telling themselves that they don't have any overwhelm, right? Well, until it hits them again, then they go get another session. Oh, okay, I feel better now, right? Just like this whole thing about being cause over life. When you finish OT7, you're supposed to be cause over life. Well, you can interpret that a lot of different ways. And Scientologists will. They'll reinterpret it to fit how they feel. And rather than holding some standard there that this now means I can do superpowers and I can do this and I can do that sort of thing. You see what I mean? It's all subjective, and it's all has to do with the cognitive dissonance, because the objective fact is, when you look at a clear or an OT in Scientology and you look at their life and you look at what's going on in their life, it's really not a whole lot different than before they ever got involved with Scientology in the first place. It certainly isn't leaps and bounds better, from my experience, both personally and having observed many, many, many Scientologists over the years. They have the same problems and the same difficulties and the same adverse reactions to things as everybody else. So So really, I guess a summary answer to this question would be cognitive dissonance, right? But I think I've tried to explain a little bit more about how that works. Callie W. What is your favorite thing to do now that you are free of the restrictions of the church? Oh my God, I like to do lots of things. Mainly, I think the best answer to this question is anything I want. I don't have a set schedule anymore. I can get up when I want. I can go to bed when I want. And everything that I'm doing in my life right now is pretty much everything that I want to be doing. And I know I'm kind of lucky, very, very lucky to have my life be the way that it is. It's a lot of work. I work very hard to do what I'm doing. So I think the best way to put it is that my life is my own. I don't have anybody else telling me what to do or telling me how to think or telling me how I'm supposed to feel about things. And I think the freedom from that and the ability to just kind of do what I truly want to be doing with my life is the best and most favorite thing I've gotten from leaving Scientology behind me. John Mancini. My question is, what's next for Chris Shelton? I mean, what will you do in the future when all of the ghosts have disappeared and you are not only 1 or 2 feet out the door, but when, as you could say, Chris has left the building? Will you be able to somehow use the 27 years of experience in some way? Are you going to be in the post-cult game or completely change venues? That's a really good question. The truth is, I'm not really sure. I have been working very hard on my YouTube channel. I have started a podcast now. And of course, I don't only talk about Scientology and cult stuff. I think you've seen probably, if you look at my channel and the things that I've been putting out lately, that I'm not just focused only on Scientology. I have been broadening the scope of what I'm talking about, getting involved in talking with people from other destructive cults who have left those and talking about that subject matter. Also, my podcast, I'm trying to talk about things totally not related to Scientology, and I know that there's not as much interest in what Chris Shelton thinks about other things than Scientology, but I'm putting myself out there and trying to put some sensible and critical thinking talk out there, and at least what I think sensible, and trying to, get some interest generated in those, in those subjects too. I think that I never would have imagined a year or two ago that I'd be doing this right now. So it's really hard for me to think of where I'm going to be in a year or two. I'm not sure. When I first started doing videos and stuff, I told myself, and I told other people close to me, I said, if I'm still talking about Scientology a year from now, please shoot me. But during that year that I started doing this, I recovered a great deal. I got through a lot of personal recovery with Scientology, but it only opened my eyes to the fact that I had a lot more to do. And in the course of doing that, I learned so much more about the 5,000 plus groups out there that are just as destructive, if not more, than Scientology is. And it only spurred me to want to do more activism about those groups and about this subject and try to help people out with it. The whole goal of what I've been about and what I've been doing is not just to bitch and moan and complain about Scientology, but has been to educate and try to inform and try to do anything I can with my voice to help people with rationality and with critical thinking and with skepticism and reason. And that's my effort now. And where that's going to take me, I'm not quite sure. I've got this book coming out on Scientology. I've got another one planned for next year, and I've got other things I'm going to be talking about and expanding into, and I want to move out more into the skeptics community and that sort of thing too, if I could. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. And I think that if I had to be nailed down to something, I'd say that the post-cult world is probably one I'll be in for a little while as I meet other professionals in this arena and talk with them and interview them and get their ideas on things and try to help people out with this. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. ADC. Hi Chris, I'm a big fan of yours from Italy. Some years ago I was in a group that I would describe as destructive. It was and still is masked as a company that sells self-help seminaries, public speaking classes, motivation courses, and the list goes on. They refer to NLP, Reiki, law of attraction, and every kind of new age-ish nonsense. Many of those courses are designed to get you to enter the group and start what they call collaboration. As you go up the hierarchy, this collaboration becomes more and more taxing in terms of time, energy, and money. They use the same techniques as destructive cults: language manipulation, uniform clothing, communal living, control over your diet, how much you sleep, love bombing, all the package. But they use those techniques in a gentler way than other cults like Scientology. If you climb the ladder of their hierarchy, they'll eventually become more and more abusive, but they'll never reach some levels. For example, I have never heard of actual physical abuse, even though I have proof of physical menacing. I think those kind of groups could be potentially even more dangerous than standard destructive cults because they are more difficult to recognize since they are not as abusive as the others. My personal explanation for this is I think they rise when someone who is not a sociopath tries to mimic other cult leaders in order to raise money, but he is not as deranged as other cult leaders, and he understands the need to not cross certain lines. I would like to know if you knew about those kind of groups and what do you think about them? Well, there are, according to some studies and estimates I've read, 5,000 plus destructive cults out there. And just because a group might be a lesser gradient or lesser degree than Scientology or the Duggars Quiverful movement or something like that, or say the David Koresh's group, or Jim Jones's group, who all ended up killing themselves, right? Or Heaven's Gate or something like that. Just because a group isn't obviously that doesn't mean it's not going to turn into that. And if a group has destructive cult characteristics, then it's something to be avoided and stay away from. A physical menacing, for example, is something that very easily could cross the line, just like that, into being physically violent or physically damaging. So I wouldn't go anywhere near a group that was doing something like that, that was imposing on me physically. The main thing, or one of the main things for sure to look for in any group that a person is going to join is, are you able to leave the group at any point? Are you able to ask questions of the group leaders or of the dogma or the rules or regulations? If you can't ask questions and get honest, straight answers, this is not a group that you should probably have anything to do with. And that's one of the key things, because then you're talking about a group that doesn't want you thinking for yourself. They want you thinking only in terms of their black and white views. And that is a hallmark of a destructive cult. Other ones, of course, being a leader or leaders whose word is law, who you must listen to and revere and be in awe of. And then of course the focus on money is also a major factor. So, and those are not all the characteristics there are. There are other ones too, right? Developing an us versus them mentality, where people in that group are the focus of a positive attention, and everybody who's not in that group is the focus of negative attention and is the bad guys or the enemy somehow, or must be dealt with somehow, or not to be trusted. That sort of us versus them thinking is very, very dangerous, because it immediately opens the door to justifying physical violence or carrying out some kind of damaging activity against those enemies of the group, right? That sort of thing. So those lines can get a little gray, a little blurry sometimes as a group develops and as it moves, through an evolution. And a group doesn't have to go in that direction. They can also just as easily go in a more sensible, rational direction and not develop into a destructive cult. So I can't speak in any more general or broad terms than that, right? Because I don't know which group this is that you're talking about specifically, if this is just some multi-level marketing thing that uses high-pressure sales techniques. That's not necessarily a destructive cult. That's a multi-level marketing activity, right, that uses hard sell and high pressure sales techniques. So in terms of, whether something's a destructive cult or not, you have to look at destructive, the word destructive there, in terms of economic destruction, physical destruction, emotional destruction, psychological destruction. Like what are the results of this group? Not all groups that engage in high pressure sales techniques are destructive cults. Right? So you have to gauge that destruction and look at, are you left at the end of your activity with this group, are you left bankrupt and destitute with no possibility of getting your money back or any legal recourse because you've signed your rights away, right? That would be destructive. So it isn't necessarily physically destructive, nobody's physically slapping you around, but they just ruined you financially. That's destructive. So that's kind of a way you could gauge these groups and whether there's something you want to be involved in or not. It's time for Flash Answers. A.N. Mouse. A long time ago, a friend of mine found an LP of LRH's music called The Power of Source by the Apollo Stars. I remember thinking it was interesting looking, particularly the photo on the back cover of LRH in a cap with big headphones on. But I requested my friend not to play it. He was laughing at my serious face as he slipped the vinyl back in the sleeve. In Critical Q&A number 33, you explained that people would praise LRH's pulp in near ecstatic states. Did you find that it the same for his music? Yeah, I did. People were, nuts about his music, and he sings personally on this album called The Road to Freedom. He sings a song called Thank You for Listening. Thank you for listening, and this, it was awful, right? Just awful stuff. But that music, for the most part, wasn't even written by him. He wrote some of the lyrics or something, but some actual professional musicians actually did the arranging and the music writing and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, people in Scientology go gaga over Hubbard's music just like they do over Hubbard's Pulp Fiction. Curious onlooker, when reading about the Sea Org, I've come across accounts of prominent members who blew and subsequently returned to the Sea Org. Marty Rathbun and Tommy Davis, for example. In your experience, how common is it for Sea Org members to blow at some point, or more than once, during their career? Did you do that, or did you have the Sea Org colleagues who did so? In Scientology, the word blow means to take off without authorization, go AWOL, leave. And yeah, people in the Sea Org do that all the time, and lots of them do come back. They get recovered back in, and they do some kind of ethics program, and they, hang around doing a lot of physical labor and whatnot while they get sorted out, and then they get back to work, right? And yes, I did blow. There was a period of time where I was in management, and I couldn't take it anymore. I blew for 3 days, and I came back. The Loner. Question about your use of spiritual existence as consciousness or awareness. Do you mean something along the lines of mind-body dualism? I had to look that up as far as what mind-body dualism is, meaning that the mind exists separate from the body or as a separate thing from the body. And yeah, I think in terms of how I was answering earlier questions about this or how I hope things are or how they will turn out, yeah, I'd say that there's a mind-body dualism idea going on in my head about that. And so we come to the end of another episode of Critical Q&A. I hope that these answers were of some use and value to you. And if so, hey, think about it's Christmas season. Think about becoming a Patreon of on my Patreon campaign, or flowing me some support using PayPal or whatever. But regardless of any of that, thank you very much for coming around. I really love that you guys are interested in my answers to these questions and in the subject matter in general. Feel free to fire any questions at all at me. Leave them in the comments section of this video, and I will see them and I will get around to them. So until next week, happy Star Wars viewing to all of you. I will definitely be there this week, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.